Hey man, most men waste years of their lives playing a game they can never win, trying to make a woman miss them. They think if they pull back just enough, post the right photos, ignore her calls for a few days, or act colder than they feel, she'll suddenly be hit with regret and come crawling back. But here's the truth. When you operate with the intention of making her miss you, you've already lost your frame. Because what you're really doing is reacting to her absence instead of owning your presence. You're centering your actions around her, when the only way to truly shift the dynamic is to center your actions around yourself. Women don't miss you because you want them to. They miss you when you become a man too rooted in himself to ever chase validation. The trap of trying to make her miss you is that it always comes from need. And women can smell need on a man the way sharks smell blood in water. You can post all the gym selfies you want, surround yourself with other women in photos, or pretend you're too busy for her, but if it's done with the intention of sparking her jealousy or pulling her back, she'll feel the energy behind it, and that energy screams weakness. True strength is not pretending you don't care while secretly hoping she notices. True strength is actually not caring, and that only happens when you stop playing her game and start building your own world, with or without her in it. So what should you do instead? Instead of trying to manipulate her emotions, shift all that energy back into yourself. Build your body, sharpen your mind, expand your network, chase your vision, not because you want her to see it, but because that's who you are becoming, regardless of who's watching. Ironically, this is the exact thing that makes women miss you. Not the performance of indifference, but the embodiment of purpose. When she sees that you didn't collapse when she left, that you didn't shrink into bitterness, that you didn't orbit her absence but expanded into your own greatness, that's when the regret hits, because she realizes she was never the center of your world, you were. There's something magnetic about a man who doesn't flinch when a woman walks away. Most men crumble, spiral, beg, or try to force her attention back onto them, but the man who doesn't try to make her miss him stands apart. He doesn't block her to provoke curiosity. He doesn't post cryptic captions to bait her. He doesn't pretend to move on just to get a reaction. He actually moves on. He replaces the time he used to give her with time invested in himself. He fills the silence not with games, but with growth. And that silence becomes deafening, not because he crafted it as a weapon, but because he no longer needs to explain it. That's the paradox. The less you care if she misses you, the more she inevitably will. Understand this. Missing someone is not an action, it's a reaction. You cannot force it. You cannot engineer it. You cannot bend her into feeling it. Missing only happens when someone realizes they've lost something valuable. And if you've been chasing, begging, over-explaining, and trying to manipulate her emotions, you've already stripped yourself of that value in her eyes. What restores it is not another tactic, it's transformation. Stop trying to make her miss you and start becoming the man she could never replace in the first place. Not by begging, not by pretending, but by living so fully that her absence becomes irrelevant. That is the secret. She'll never admit out loud. The men women miss the most are the ones who never tried to be missed at all. When you stop trying to make her miss you, you immediately step out of the frame of neediness and into the frame of abundance. Think about it. Every act of manipulation, every game, every calculated silence is really a confession. You're confessing that she still controls you, that your actions are dictated by her attention. But when you detach from that need and redirect it toward yourself, you reclaim authority over your own life. Suddenly, you're not waiting by the phone. You're not crafting captions for her to decode. You're not lingering in limbo hoping she remembers you. You're moving forward, training harder, working smarter, building deeper connections, and sharpening your vision. That energy is magnetic because it's self-sustaining. You're no longer feeding off her reaction, you're feeding off your purpose. Here's the irony. When you stop trying to make her miss you, you actually create the conditions that make it inevitable. Why? Because women are not drawn to the man who is obsessed with them. They're drawn to the man who is obsessed with something greater than them. A man who is centered in his mission radiates an energy that women can't resist. She may have walked away thinking she could find better, but when she sees you thriving without her, when she sees you expanding into your fullest self, she realizes what she lost. That realization doesn't come because you engineered it. It comes because you stopped caring about engineering anything at all. You simply lived, and that life itself became the contrast against the emptiness of her decision. Most men think the answer lies in external displays, more money, a new car, a rebound relationship to showcase on social media. But the real power lies in the internal shift. It's in the way you walk into a room without needing anyone's approval. It's in the calmness on your face when she expects to see bitterness. It's in the unshakable silence that says, I no longer orbit your absence, I orbit my purpose. Women pick up on that energy instantly. They may never admit it out loud, but they feel it, and that feeling haunts them because it's the energy of a man who no longer needs them, who no longer even thinks about needing them. That's the man who leaves an imprint they can't shake. The real reason trying to make her miss you never works is because it keeps you emotionally tethered to her. You may think you've pulled back, but as long as your moves are motivated by her reaction, she still has power over you. She's still in your head, dictating your behavior from a distance, and women can sense when you're still hooked. They may not see the strings, but they feel them. True detachment isn't about pretending to move on, it's about genuinely moving on. It's about reaching a point where her presence or absence no longer defines your mood, your energy, or your drive. Only when you cut that tether does she feel the loss, because only then does she realize you're no longer available for her games. So what do you do instead? You stop performing and start becoming. You stop scheming ways to pull her back and start building ways to push yourself forward. Every ounce of energy you are spending on making her miss you must be redirected into building a life so fulfilling, so magnetic, that you no longer even care if she sees it. Because here's the raw truth. Women are far more haunted by the man they can't read than by the man who tries to write himself into their thoughts. The man who doesn't care if she notices is the one she can't stop noticing. That's not a trick, that's not a tactic, that's the natural gravity of a man who has chosen himself above all else. When you stop trying to make her miss you, you flip the power dynamic without even trying. Before she was the center of your orbit, you adjusted your behavior based on her mood, her response, her presence or absence. Every move you made was reactive. But once you step into this mindset of living for yourself, you become the center of your own universe again. She goes from being the sun to being a passing planet, and that shift is profound, because when a man becomes his own center, he stops bleeding energy outward. He becomes grounded, magnetic, unshakable, and women feel that difference immediately. The man who once begged for her attention suddenly radiates a calm indifference that forces her to reevaluate everything she thought she knew about him. Silence rooted in strength is very different from silence rooted in games. One comes from a place of abundance, the other from scarcity. When your silence is strategic, when you're ignoring her just to provoke a reaction, she feels the desperation beneath it. It doesn't attract her, it repels her, because she sees through the act. But when your silence is natural, when you're simply too busy living your life, pursuing your goals, and building your empire to obsess over her absence, it lands differently. That silence feels unbothered, composed, and confident. And that's the kind of silence that drives women crazy, because she can't manipulate it, she can't control it, and she can't stop wondering what could make you so detached from her in the first place. This approach works because it touches on the deepest truth of female psychology. Women crave what they can't fully own. If you're always available, always chasing, always reacting, she knows she has you, and the moment she knows she has you, her attraction starts to fade. But when you stop trying to make her miss you and instead pour into yourself, you become unpredictable again. She doesn't know if she can still access your attention. She doesn't know if she still holds influence over you. And that uncertainty, while uncomfortable for her, reignites the same spark that once drew her to you in the first place. Mystery breeds desire, and nothing is more mysterious than a man who doesn't need her to complete him. Here's the kicker. Most men never reach this point because they're addicted to the performance of moving on rather than the reality of it. They want her to see them happy, to notice them thriving, to hear about their successes, but that's still attachment, still desperation in disguise. The real win comes when you stop caring whether she notices at all. You're not living your life as a performance, you're living it because it's yours. That authenticity is what separates men who truly move on from those who only act like they have. And authenticity is impossible to fake. A woman may not respect the act, but she will always respect the truth of a man who has genuinely outgrown her. The ultimate shift comes when you realize that her missing you or not missing you no longer matters. The entire game unravels when you stop playing it, because your power isn't in manipulating her feelings, it's in mastering your own. It's in becoming so anchored in your mission, your standards, and your vision that her presence or absence is irrelevant to your growth. That's the man she'll never forget. Not because he tried to make her miss him, but because he didn't need her to. And ironically, that's when she finally does miss you. When she realizes that the man who once placed her on a pedestal now walks with such power that she no longer even qualifies to stand beside him. Detachment creates gravity, and gravity pulls everything toward it without effort. When you stop trying to make her miss you and start building a life that is fulfilling with or without her, you create an energy field around you that others can't help but feel. It's the aura of a man who is unbothered, focused, and disciplined. He isn't chasing validation because his validation comes from his accomplishments, his purpose, and his self-respect. That energy doesn't need to prove itself, it simply exists. And women, by nature, are drawn to it. They may not be able to explain why, but they feel the weight of a man who lives detached from their approval. That's when she starts to circle back. Not because you forced her to miss you, but because your gravity makes her realize what she lost. When you stop playing games and embody this detachment, you force her to confront the truth she's been avoiding, that she never had control over you in the first place. She may have thought she could manipulate your emotions, push your buttons, or make you jump through hoops just to prove yourself. But your silence, your restraint, your refusal to overreact proves otherwise, and that realization is unsettling for her. Because if she can't control you, she can't predict you, and if she can't predict you, she can't replace you. Women may leave men they can control, but they obsess over men they can't. That's why detachment isn't about punishment, it's about liberation. You're not bound by her actions anymore, and that freedom makes you untouchable. Women respect men who never fold. It doesn't matter how much pressure she applies, how cold she gets, or how emotional she becomes. If you hold steady, her perception of you changes. Most men fold at the first sign of tension. They explain, they beg, they chase, they plead. But the man who doesn't fold forces her to see him differently. He becomes the anchor in the storm, the one presence that doesn't bend to her chaos. And even if she walks away, even if she pretends to move on, she remembers that steadiness. That's why she circles back months or even years later, because she can't forget the man who stayed calm while everyone else crumbled. And that man wasn't trying to make her miss him. He was simply living in his own truth. Becoming untouchable isn't about cutting women off or living in bitterness. It's about building yourself to the point where no woman's actions can destabilize you. It's about becoming so secure in your identity that her rejection, her absence, or her betrayal doesn't derail your focus. You still train, you still build, you still grow. And because of that, you become the man she measures every other man against. Not because you forced her to, but because you showed her a strength she can't find anywhere else. That's the kind of man women never stop thinking about. The one who didn't crumble when she left, but instead grew sharper, stronger, and more dangerous without her. The irony of this entire mindset is that when you stop trying to make her miss you, you stop living reactively and start living proactively. You stop waiting for her attention and start creating your own legacy. And that shift, more than anything else, is what women truly crave, but rarely admit. They want to be part of a man's world, not his entire world. When you stop orbiting around her and instead create a life she has to earn her way into, you become the kind of man she respects, desires, and regrets losing. And whether she ever comes back or not becomes irrelevant, because you'll finally see the truth. The man who no longer plays games is the man who always wins. When you stop trying to make her miss you, you stop living in reaction to her absence and start living in creation of your presence. That shift is massive because it changes how not only she perceives you, but how the entire world perceives you. People are drawn to men who radiate certainty, who don't crumble when tested, and who don't allow their worth to be measured by someone else's attention. You become a man who creates, not a man who waits, and creation is magnetic. When you're building your vision, pursuing your goals, and anchoring yourself in discipline, you exude a quiet dominance that speaks louder than any calculated move ever could. That's when women, even the one who left, begin to feel the gravity of what they lost. Not because you tried to manipulate them, but because you outgrew them. The reality is, women don't miss the man who chases, who explains, or who begs. They miss the man who refuses to be defined by them. They miss the man who in their absence builds himself into someone greater than he was when she had him. This is why so many women circle back after months or years. Not because you played games, but because you became a man she no longer qualifies for. She remembers the man who gave too much, but she sees the man who now gives only to himself and his mission, and she feels the sting of losing him. That sting isn't nostalgia, it's regret. And regret is the most powerful fuel for missing someone. But it only arrives when you've stopped caring, if she ever feels it. Understand this clearly. When you live to make her miss you, you hand her the keys to your life. You let her dictate your pace, your moves, your growth. But when you stop playing that game, you take those keys back. You become the one in control, not of her, but of yourself. And self-control is the highest form of masculine power. It makes you unshakable, it makes you respected, and it makes you attractive in ways you can't fake. Women sense it. They feel the difference between a man who lives for their attention and a man who lives for his purpose. And the latter is the man they chase, the man they admire, and the man they miss long after the game has ended. This is why the true strategy isn't silence, blocking, posting, or pulling away. The true strategy is transformation, transforming yourself from a man who once begged for love into a man who now embodies strength, independence, and vision. You don't need her to miss you, because you've built a life where her presence is no longer the prize. You are. You've turned the tables without trying, because she now has to question whether she can still access the version of you she once took for granted, and often by the time she realizes the depth of what she lost, it's too late, because the man you've become no longer wants the woman who couldn't see his value when he was still in front of her. So stop trying to make her miss you, stop performing, stop strategizing, stop giving her space in your head that she hasn't earned. Do this instead. Build yourself into a man whose presence is unforgettable. Focus so fiercely on your growth, your mission, and your standards that her memory of you becomes haunting, not because you forced her to remember, but because she can't forget. The man who doesn't need to be missed is the one who always is, and once you understand that truth, you'll never play her games again. Because you'll finally see that the only person you ever needed to make miss you was yourself. The strong, grounded, unshakable version of you that she lost the second you stopped living for her.